أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Knowledge and education have always been important principles in Islam since the earliest days of the religion. Thus, Edmonton's Muslim community is delighted at the University of Alberta's announcement of the Edmonton Council of Muslim Communities, or ECMC, Chair in Islamic Studies.
The Edmonton Council of Muslim Communities is an umbrella organization made up of representatives from 9 mosques and Muslim organizations that serve about 35,000 Muslims in the Edmonton region. We have been focusing on 4 areas with respect to education: public policy, interfaith, and communications, both within our community and to the greater Edmonton community.
This is a tremendously important initiative. Our goal is to increase the knowledge about the diversity of traditions, cultures, and interpretations within Islam, about its rich intellectual and cultural heritage, and its interactions with societies and faiths over the last 1400 years.
Muslims first began to settle in Edmonton over 100 years ago. Around the turn of the 20th century, a trickle of Lebanese immigrants began to arrive in the city, seeking the promise of a better life. In the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, there were waves of Muslim immigrants arriving in the city. Many came after the Arab-Israeli Wars and the Civil War in Lebanon. East Indians came from Uganda after President Idi Amin forced them out, and others fled from conflicts in India and Pakistan. The 1990s saw Muslims arriving from Bosnia, Somalia, and Afghanistan. In addition, many came from around the globe seeking a better economic and educational future for their families. As the Muslims settled and established roots, they built community centers and places of worship that demonstrate rich Islamic architecture. The first mosque in all of North America, the Al-Rashid Mosque, was opened in 1938 with Edmonton Mayor John Fry cutting the ribbon. Many of the grandchildren of the families that built this mosque continue to live in the city.
The Al-Rashid Mosque is an important symbol to the Muslim community and to Canadians at large. It's a manifestation of Muslims being a part of Canada for many, many decades. And it is preserved in Fort Edmonton Park in memory of that history.
As the population of Muslims has grown, additional centers for worship and social activities have been established throughout Edmonton. The design of some of these centers interprets Islamic architectural principles in a modern Western context. Consistent with Islamic philosophy, the use of symmetry and geometry provides a sense of stability, tranquility, and balance. This diversity of architecture is a small representation of the rich heritage and diversity of the Muslim world.
Even though Islam is part of the 3 Abrahamic traditions, including Judaism and Christianity, and is the most historical of these traditions in the sense of having data available, it is not understood very well historically by Western scholarship and by Western people in general. There are Muslims in just about every country in the world, and Muslims speak over 400 languages. There is a great deal of interpretive difference, there is a great deal of ethnic difference, and there are a wide variety of differences in customs among Muslims.
The history and influence of Islamic civilization over nearly 14 centuries since the hijrah of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has often been overlooked in Western societies. For example, the Dark Ages in Europe were in fact not so dark. During this time of relative cultural and intellectual inactivity in Europe, the Islamic civilizations thrived in a period of enlightenment. Muslims made major scientific, cultural, and economic advances that ultimately powered the Renaissance, and these influences are still visible throughout our society.
Islam took everything that it was available to it and incorporated it into its civilization. So, for example, it took material from Greeks, from India, from China, Persia, and from Africa. It incorporated all of these intellectual traditions into its own, openly and enthusiastically. And so Islam in its early development stage was an intellectual center for all civilization.
Among the major contributions of Islamic civilizations was the establishment of major centers of learning. These include the world's first universities with extensive libraries, such as Al-Azhar in Cairo, which was founded in 971 AD, over 200 years before Europe's earliest universities, such as Oxford and Cambridge, and almost 700 years before the first universities in North America. Scholars of the sciences made advances in chemistry, physics, astronomy, mathematics, and medicine. Muslim scholars adopted the concept of zero from India and created the decimal system in mathematics. They also discovered numerous chemical elements, studied optics and human anatomy, and advanced astronomy by building observatories and correcting the Greek astronomical tables. For many centuries, both Muslim and European countries used Ibn Sina's or Avicenna's canon of medicine. Islamic civilizations also made cultural contributions, including literature, poetry, art, and architecture. Muslim architecture reflects the local cultures, traditions, and the built environment. Therefore, the mosques built in China look aesthetically different from those in Spain or Arabia. However, today, especially in the Western world, a lot of this heritage has been forgotten or lost.
Well, that fact is not well known among most Westerners who look at the Muslim world today with a certain kind of colored glasses and say, well, it's not very advanced. Well, at one time, Muslim civilization was the America of the world.
Instead, the focus has shifted to stereotypes and misperceptions reinforced by political acts carried out in the name of Islam.
Non-Muslim understanding of Islam is minimal. And if we don't address that problem, we will never overcome the situation that Muslims find themselves in, where a tiny minority has hijacked the whole religion.
As James Wolfenson, president of the World Bank, said, and I quote, "All too often, we tend to forget these days that Islam carries with it values and a culture from which we can all learn." End quote. With the establishment of the Chair in Islamic Studies, we hope that we can carry forward our tradition of intellectual search and understanding, thereby bridging cultural gaps and creating trust.
This chair is an expression of that long-term intellectual development, and I think it's an extraordinary step on the part of the community.
As the ECMC, we've been amazed and very grateful to the Muslim community, to the university, and the government officials for the tremendous support we've received.
Whether it's the young, the old, the university graduates, students that are doing postgraduate work, Muslims of the Sunni or Shia persuasion, it is a tremendously important milestone.